Hey everybody, welcome to tonight's episode of The Deep Dive. As you can see here, it's a little bit of different people here tonight. We've got Jacob, he's coming back in a second. And then we've got our regular here, Ashley Wakefield, and Garrett Sayles is back again tonight. So excited to have a full house here tonight as we handle kind of a sensitive topic, a topic that is one that's really near and dear to my heart. It's been one that's been kind of a journey for me, and one that I've really thought a lot about. So I'm really excited to talk about some of these issues and things like that. If you're new here, we're doing this as a part of Wayfarers Christian Church. This is a church that we have every Sunday. We do a live service at 7 p.m., so don't forget to check that out. But yeah, thanks everybody for being here. How's everybody doing today?
Good. We're good.
Yeah,
pretty good. I'm fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, if I'll go ahead and get us started off. This is kind of a part 2 to a series that happened 2 weeks ago. Jacob preached last week, and so he got to come on this podcast / live stream and talk about a lot of the things that he was doing with his sermon and some of the passions that he had with that. It was really great. If you have a chance, go back in our YouTube archives and check that out. He explains why he has pink hair as well. So it's fun.
Go see why.
But it was great. But 2 weeks ago, we had hit on a topic at the very end where I had kind of asked a question that had sparked a whole new line of thinking, as that usually happens on these deep dives. So we figured we'd take that topic and move it to today. So rather than just ask you to remember what happened 2 weeks ago, I'm just going to go ahead and ask the same question again, and we'll kind of work our way from there. So I'm going to kind of leave it open to anybody that wants to feel free to talk about it first. But this was the question I asked 2 weeks ago. We were talking about setting boundaries, and we were talking about how it's important to have both care and consideration for other people and to be in their lives, but also to know that at some point we need to set a boundary in which that person becomes harmful to us as people. And we need to step back a little bit and maybe let them figure things out on their own for a little bit, just because they've become toxic as a person and that's become too difficult. And so we were talking about where are the ways that we can learn to sort of draw that line. And as we were talking about it, I brought up a really interesting situation I'd seen going around where there was a review on a very well-known dating app called Bumble, where a woman had complained after trying Bumble, saying that she felt like she was just looking for friendship and relationships on this site, and she was meeting many people on Bumble that had mental health issues. And she was very frustrated because for her, she was just looking for someone that was healthy, that was someone that could, just do life with in many ways. And she didn't want to necessarily meet so many people and straight out of the gate find out they had all this mental health issues. And that sparked a curiosity that usually happens in my brain, where I think about people's statements like that. And it sparked a question that I brought up to the group, which was, is that the right attitude to have towards people that are struggling with mental health issues? Should we have this attitude where as soon as we find out they have a mental health issue, should we immediately put up a boundary and say, I can't be in relationship with you? Or is there a better way to go about that where we can have a relationship but maybe have some boundaries? What are some of the boundaries that we should have? That's the kind of can of worms that I'm opening up for all of us to talk about tonight, is where do you guys find yourself in this period that we're in, where we're seeing a lot of mental health issues coming more and more regularly? And I think 2020 honestly has been an awful year for that. I think that's caused a lot more of that to crop up. And where do you guys find yourselves navigating that? Do you find yourselves stepping away from people that are struggling with that or moving towards them? What's sort of your guiding principles for how to handle a situation like that? So, floor is y'all. Yours.
Well, I guess I'll start.
All right, go for it,
I'm
Garrett.
going first. Well, I guess for me, how do I handle those situations with people who have mental health?
Especially in your church context.
Okay.
We're talking more about church. We've been talking about church for the last couple of weeks, and so especially in a church context where you find out one of your church members is in this context or someone you know pretty closely, what's your sort of way that you go about that?
Well, one, I always have the mindset of, I'll do the best that I can.
Mm-hmm.
Because generally, for me being a man, men have a tendency to be like fixers and kind of want to fix things and solve things. And I do understand for me, one, I do prioritize my life. I do kind of keep check, what's most important. Not saying that people who go through things aren't important, but first I am willing to just like kind of, okay, well, talk to me. What's going on? What are you thinking? What are your thoughts? What's going on in your head? And in that situation, I'll do the best I can if I have an answer. Sometimes, some people, from my experience, who do kind of call and have questions and kind of feel a way about something, from my experience, a lot of the times they just need to kind of just say it out loud and talk through it, and me be the listener.
Yeah.
And that's how I learn, sometimes hearing what they're going through. But then there have been some people, and I've been a little more discerning about this because I've also been advised as a younger kid, and I still hear this a lot. I've learned to kind of also be protective of my conversation and what I get involved in, because sometimes some people have things they want to talk to you about, and that's fine. And then there are other people sometimes where you can't find yourself involved in a circular conversation, and you guys are kind of spiraling it's like, I'm very careful with that. I don't get caught up in that anymore.
So if you don't see the person progressing, you try and
If the
back away.
conversation isn't, then it's kind of like, at this point, where are we getting with this?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'll leave it there. But it's for me, I know it's been a case by case. Sometimes I can help, sometimes I can't. But me, I do know a lot of people, and so I know for a fact if I can't help you with that situation, I may not have gone through that specifically, so I probably can't help you through that situation. But I know somebody who can, and who somebody who's a counselor, somebody who may specialize in psychology. I'll definitely get you in contact with them. But Garrett does the best he can, and then from there, if I can help, I will. But if I can't, I probably know somebody who will, or who's willing to. And I kind of this is who you want to get in contact with, and just kind of reach out and work on their behalf, and then connect them.
Yeah.
So I had a question. I wanted to respond, but I had a question about something that you said. So I guess I was thinking about this though, but everybody progresses at different rates, right? So I guess I see it as progression is kind of subjective depending on the individual. So how do you know, I guess as far as patience is concerned, like how do you know when to like put an end to the conversation? Because like you don't, I guess it's not so much the person doesn't want to fix it. It's just that depending on that person and what they're going through, it may take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And so I guess with how do you balance that out between like, okay, this is, I'm ready to let this go and end this conversation, but also being patient and long suffering.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd be curious your thoughts on that, and then I'll give my thoughts.
So basically, how do I know to cut it off? When do I allow to?
Yeah, like how do you know, like, okay, this person, like, I just talked to them about this on Tuesday. Why are they calling me again on Thursday talking about this? And it's like, well, it's like how do you know when to extend patience and long suffering with that person, understanding that what they're going through is a process and it's not something that can be fixed for like one phone call or something?
Yeah. One, just being me, I know Garrett, Ellington, Elijah Sayles. I am an acquired taste kind of guy. That I know. I'm not for everybody. I'm okay with that.
So you just kind of have an intuitive, I know that this person's going to work. Is that what you're saying? Or?
Yeah. I definitely notice the signs. If I feel and notice that this conversation is becoming quarrelsome, where there's clear frustration that's being built up, what I'll say is, okay, I hear you. I've done it before. I hear you. Do you mind if we revisit this conversation maybe at a later day or later time. So I can tell right now there's tension in this conversation. And I'll just say it, like, because I mean, we both probably know it anyway, so it's just, I'll just be the first one to say it. Like, I clearly see how there's some tension in this situation. I just, take control. That's not a bad thing, but I know how to take control sometimes and just say, you know what, this isn't healthy. Let's just revisit this conversation later if you're up for it. And if we do, we do. We don't, we don't. And then for me, I know naturally, I am a patient person. Okay. And sometimes I can be too patient. I can be too understanding. But when you're too patient, too understanding, you sometimes can overlook disrespect. And at that time, when I do feel disrespected, when I do feel like, okay, you're pushing it, I'll vocalize it. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to, like curse you out or anything like that. But I don't have a problem vocalizing, like you realize you just did this. Sometimes they don't know. But for me, I know that's just Garrett. I know that's not going to be for everybody. So everybody's not as direct as I can be. And I'm okay with that. And yeah. That's just for Garrett,
Well, I guess, that's good. That's good. I think that's a good point too. But I guess I just mean, like, what if the person isn't angry? What if they're just depressed? Like, what if they lost someone or they lost something like a job and they're just like, they just want to constantly talk about it. And you're like, this is what I told you to fix it. And why are you calling me, talk to me about this again, kind of thing. I guess that's where I was.
Oh, so you're revisiting the same conversation over.
Yeah. And it's just it's not because they're mad at you. It's just, they're just upset and they're hurt and they just want to talk about it,
In that context, I would have a little more patience. I know if I'm aware they lost somebody or something like that and they're going through it, yeah. And then I do know at the same time, I'll listen, but at some point I will notice, because and some of this stuff is, it's just you kind of notice in the situation. Sometimes I'm like, okay, if you're talking to me about the same thing over and over again, and you tell me that you want to talk about it, okay. But then one thing that lets me know is you have a habit of wallowing in your thoughts too long. So you may need somebody to kind of help you construct and get out of that sometimes. Because I do understand that sometimes for me, I do also believe that love, when you love somebody, you care for them, love does correct. Love does, it does display a sense of discipline. And a lot of times, if I notice it, I will recognize, okay, I want to encourage you to speak to X, Y, and Z, or however I pitch that or something like that. But I do know sometimes some people just have a habit of just like wallowing in their thoughts, and it's not helping, because you're talking about it, you want to talk about it. That clearly tells me that you want to get over this. You want to do better. You want to, you want to get over because you're talking about it. And sometimes folks don't really just realize what they need sometimes. But that's just for me. That's what I would do. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I think one of the hard things with your question is that for the person that receives that kind of moment where you might step back, if you're the one that's depressed and someone is like, okay, you're wallowing in your thoughts too much, I need to kind of pull away, that oftentimes creates an unintentional negative in the person that's depressed, feeling that they are the burden to that person. And oftentimes it can cause a downward spiral even further into depression, because not only are you depressed about whatever grief situation happened, but now you're depressed because your friends are pulling away from you because you're depressed, and then that spiral continues downward, right? And so what I have tried to do is to be very clear about my reasoning for why I'm doing things the way I'm doing them, and not leave anything to the depressed person or whatever they're going through mental illness wise, not leave anything up to intuition or guesswork for them. I try and be very clear about, okay, here's where you are, and right now this is draining on me, and I totally know that you are in this circumstance, and I'm not asking you to change overnight, but I am saying that I can't continue with this any further right now because this is personally draining to me. and that's not a description of your worth. That's not a description of what I think about you, our friendship. This is just where we both are at right now. And I found that helps a lot more than if you just tried to pull back without any clear explanation or communication. And I think that, for me at least, that has helped navigate your question a lot more. Is, okay, when are the times when I think that is the choice that I should make to pull back? Well, it's when I have a good reason that I can describe to the other person, that I have a very clear and defined reason for that I can describe to the other person. And that's usually my way of thinking about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
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 What do you think, Jacob?
Yeah, I think that's a very good thing. Of course, being very open in communication about why you're pulling away. I think, and you kind of touched on a little bit, when how to know when to pull back sometimes is knowing your own mental health. Can your mental health carry the burden of somebody else's? Are you in a place to fix their issue? Are you in a place to help them mentally? And if you're not, then you need to be honest about it and then tell them, hey, you might need to go see someone else, and that's not because of you, that's because of where I'm at right now, and I'm just not in a state to be there for you. And I want you to have the best help you can get, and I'm not that for you. As Noah knows more about, but as an Enneagram 2 type, that's a hard sentence for me to say because I'm very much the person who wants to be the person to help. I want to be that person someone counts on. And I have personally held on to a situation trying to fix it for someone way longer than I needed to. And it hurt me to the point to where I now needed somebody.
All right.
Otherwise, I couldn't live life. So knowing your own mental health and your own mental capacity to help them is the first step, I think, to knowing how long you can keep going. Because obviously, no one expects someone to change overnight.
Right.
Over 3 months, the conversation can be a little different on that end. You know, it's like, come on, we've had the same conversation 5 times a week for the last 3 months. Let's talk about ways we can change, like move on. And then if they're not willing to do that, then they're using it as a crutch. And that may be another time we need to reevaluate the conversations we're having.
Yeah.
Because if you're using your issues as a crutch to just be looked at, which is not everybody, and it's a small percentage of people, but sometimes, like, pain medicine can become addictive.
Yeah.
It's a good thing, but it can, over time, become a natural order of life. Always talking about what's making you depressed or your issues or the loss you've taken, it's a good thing to do so because you need to vocalize it, right? You don't need to just hold it in. That's not good for you.
I was just going to ask a question about that.
But doing it too much can become a norm. And then what's a conversation without mentioning it?
Yeah.
And then you really need to, okay, do you want help or do you just want to be looked at?
That's what I was more so getting at. More so just the, man, you just said it just went away in my head. Jake, you just said
Do you want help or do you just want to be looked at?
Yeah.
that's where I was more so coming from. Me, it's because me, I'm very good on checking on people. So me personally, when I said it, I wasn't saying I pull back. I just recommend professional help, and then I would, how's it going? You know, how's this? That's more so I was coming from.
I see.
Yeah. That's a good strategy to have too, as well.
It's just, you know, because I know, like, I'm not, you know, depending on what it is, I'm not a professional in this area. Here's somebody that I know is, you know, just talk to them, and then I'll more so like check on them and then kind of encourage them. Okay, so where are you at with this? Oh, I'm so. That's good. I would, at that point, then I would reaffirm the good thing you're saying, to kind of speak words over you that more so kind of add into you a little bit more than what you're doing. So, but
I
me,
like
it's more
that.
so I noticed this problem. let's kind of see if we can kind of find somebody to give you like that professional, and then I'll just kind of follow up with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I guess I was going to make it more personal, I guess starting with me, then asking you all the question. Because I know that you brought up something I was going to bring up when you were talking. It's about internalizing it. And so that's something that I do a lot, because that's something that I've done pretty much my whole life when I was growing up. And I feel like that I brought that up last week too. It's like if I have a problem, I'm very quick to just like deal with it by myself, because I don't want to burden other people with my problems, because people get annoyed very quickly. They get impatient and they're like, I'm tired of talking about this, especially if I've told you once before this is my issue and then you haven't done anything to help. It's like, I told you once, you know what it is. I'm not going to bother you with it again. And so I guess just like the perspective of internalizing it, because I know I don't usually stay in it, because that reminds me of what Garrett was saying of wallowing in your thoughts. I guess when I get upset about something, I probably need a good 24, 48 hours, depending on what the situation is, just to just be unhappy. And then usually I bring myself back out of my funk. Now I do have moments where it'll be like a day or two, and then I'll feel good for a little bit, and then I'll go back into it again, feel good a little bit, go back into it again. And then, like I said, I usually internalize all of that. I don't I like to deal with it by myself. That way I'm not bothering anybody else. And so I guess I want to get you guys' perspectives on that. Like if you guys are more vocal with it, or do you keep it to yourself? Or
Yeah. I think that, like last week we kind of touched on this too. I'm definitely the internalizer. I don't externalize. And I know a lot of people that are externalized their emotions, and they're typically way more vocal about it, either on Facebook or with their friends or things like that. To me, I've always seen that as, my fear has always been that I will become the person that is the drain on someone else.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
And so with my own mental health, most of my life I've handled it behind closed doors. And I will say I have a story when I was 18 in which dramatically shifted my way of doing that, because before that story I was very vocal about it. I very much externalized it. And I externalized it so much that someone called suicide prevention on me.
Oh, wow.
And so,
oh my goodness.
Having something like that happen in your life creates a huge realization of what you're projecting outward to other people and how other people are perceiving it. Because I still think to this day that while the things I said probably deserved that, I do feel like it still was an overreaction. I felt like there were better ways that you could have handled that.
Like you could have talked to me first about it before you called. Yeah.
And so, from my perspective, that taught me that I couldn't trust people with that.
Yeah.
And from that point forward, I really became that internalizer that really dealt with my own emotions in the private of my own life, and very rarely ever shared those. So I have a weird story in that I've been both. But that to me has been one of the things that's driven me to really care about this topic, I guess, has been that I do feel like oftentimes people trying to help end up causing more harm. And a lot of the ways that we intentionally go about handling the situation are not as
Effective.
and also not as aware of what goes on in the mentally ill person's head.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I want to revisit that, because I think a lot of, for me at least, even the way you're describing it, that sort of pastoral role has been shifted to mental health professionals, right? And it's been moved to people in those more secular even spheres. And while I understand, I think that's good because people can be more specialized. I also feel like the reason that's happening is because pastors legitimately don't know how to handle the issue,
right?
And because they don't know how to handle the issue, it's easier to write you off to some professional
Yeah.
than to even address it, you know? And I think while I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I am saying that I'd like to see a little bit more both and, you know? I'd like to see the pastor a little bit more involved in that process than I see it currently. And I'd like to see a little bit more awareness of what things you can and can't do in a situation like that, which again is why we're having this conversation. But yeah, that's a big part of my journey.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of what I was thinking when you were talking about the issue of trust. Because I think that's one of the reasons why I don't say anything. It's like, can I trust you to not hurt me if I tell you
Right.
this? Because if I tell you this, it's basically me opening up my soul to you, basically.
Right.
And so if I do that, can I trust you enough that you're not going to take advantage of that situation and hurt me in the process?
Right.
And so it's just like easier if I deal with it by myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very interesting for me because my times where my depression has been the worst is when I internalize it too
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
Because a lot of my issue is I think I'm the burden. I'm burdening people. I don't want
Yeah.
to have other people worry about me. And that goes again with how much I want to be for other people. I don't want other people to have to be that for me sometimes, because I feel like I can't do my job good as a friend if they're constantly worrying about me. I have gotten better to the point to where I tell people about my issues for several reasons. For one, mostly because I don't want to seem like I'm too perfect, that I don't have issues. And because I'm a human and I'm flawed, and I don't want to forget that myself and let that go too far. But also because when other people know the struggles you're having, and when you overcome them, you can say, "Look what God has done." And people will be like, "Yeah, I see that. I can see that in your life. I can see the way you struggled, and now you're doing better, and I can see that." Also, something kind of relating to your story of getting Suicide Watch called on you. That did not happen to me, but in high school, there was, I didn't know him very well, but several of my friends were good friends with a guy who did commit suicide our junior year during homecoming week. And the issue was he internalized everything. He didn't let anybody know he was struggling. And so he might needed that call. Someone should have made that phone call, but because he didn't open up to anybody, that phone call was never made, or nobody intervened. So opening up is something that I would say is good for you, because if you internalize it too much, or if you internalize the wrong issue, that's going to be way more damaging to your mental health than feeling like you've been betrayed by somebody if they try to seek out help for you.
Yeah.
Because I do think they should have talked to you first, right? Before just making the phone call, in case they were misinterpreting or thinking worse than what you said.
It was a whole mess because my parents didn't know, and so they ended up calling my parents too.
Oh, yeah.
All of it happened without me knowing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a very, it was not the way you would go about it, I would say.
Yeah. And so it's but without letting someone in, then you'll feel more alone, and that doesn't always help. And so I have always felt better when people can comfort me, even though I don't want them to. I don't want to be the person that I have to lean on other people. I want to be the person they can lean on me.
Yeah. And I will say, not as a counter to that, but I will say the other side of the coin to that is that what really did help me was, at that point in my life, I really was clingy on people. I thought people could solve my mental health issues, you know? And I believed that community was the answer to mental health issues, right? As long as people are just always loving you. That's all you need. And it kind of goes back to my thoughts about codependency and how that's not a good thing, actually. It's not a good thing to be at 50% and relying on other people to be that other 50% that you need. That's kind of what I realized as I grew out of it, was the place that I needed to get to was 100%. I didn't need to keep relying on other people to give me their 50% so that I was at 100.
I got you.
And so a lot of that happened by consenting or resting in solitude, right? Like that kind of learning from myself and who I am as a person. And I say solitude, but it's not really, because as a Christian, there is this concept of God being with you, especially in moments where you are alone. You know, like I find that God shouts most in the silences of our lives, mainly because we're less preoccupied and can focus on him.
Right.
And so in my life, I have almost seen people at times, if you're, at least for me, this is the case. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but at least for me, my clinginess to people during that time in my life was not helping me get out of that spiral that I was in. What helped was coming to terms with my aloneness even, and realizing there was a God of the universe that loved me in that, which is hard. Like that is a very hard thing to teach, and I don't think that'll come overnight. But I do think after everything, you know, and I will, to this person's credit, like that called suicide prevention on me, I did get in counseling. Like I did go through a lot of things as a result of that did help me. You know, like it wasn't, you know, it wasn't all bad, but I would say that in hindsight, still, I think that this person handled that badly.
Oh, yeah.
And that to me is sort of where I would find that nuance, I guess, in what you're saying.
Well, yeah, and of course, just to clarify a little bit of what it is, the idea of oversharing is not what I mean. Oversharing is, again, a very tell sign of give me attention or look at me.
Right.
But the ability to have at least someone, one person or a group of people, friends, that you can go to and vocalize things to, that will be sometimes blunt enough to say, you know, to give you the feedback that you need, to help push you to overcome it, to help you overcome it. Because sometimes you need that boost. Sometimes, even though you don't want it, even though you may feel like you don't want it or you don't need it, sometimes you do.
Right.
Yeah.
And you need a group of friends that you can trust and allow to do that. You need people that you have given permission to do that with you. Both that you can do that to them and you can tell them and be upfront and blunt, and that they can do that to you. Because in that way, you know, oversharing or just always sharing and posting on Facebook and letting the world know and see all your things isn't always the right way to do it.
No.
That's way too oversharing, and that's way too much of something, which can then lead to the issues that you had with the oversharing
You're
thing.
a little dramatic emo kid.
Yeah, and then
Dramatic. All right.
but I do think I think just with a lot of things in this world, when we try to fix one thing, we go too far to the other.
What do you mean?
So, for when you're someone who shares a lot, and then you get hurt or something like what Noah had, someone called suicide prevention, and you're like, I'm never sharing again, and then you internalize everything. That's completely going to the opposite end of the extreme, which doesn't help anything. You see it also in churches where you go from things like hymnals only to then only doing something else. So when you go, instead of finding a middle ground, the middle ground is usually the best place to go, but we always jump from one side to the other. It's the, I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong because of my speech issue, but I'm going to try to say the word I'm wanting to say.
Pendulum?
The pendulum.
Yeah.
There we go.
There
There you go. I said it after you said it. You said it, and I was able to copy you. Thank you. So the swing of the pendulum can go from one side to the other, to the extreme of one to the extreme of the other, which is almost, it's very rarely the good thing to do. And it's almost always the worst thing to do, to go from one extreme to the other. Because you have to, because to say, to find that middle ground in being vocal or internalizing it. The middle ground in that is finding people that will listen and will give you the right feedback, instead of just sharing it to everyone or sharing it to no one. Finding someone to share it with, whether that be your pastor, your best friend, your small group, whatever it be, or if you just want to, if you want to go straight to the therapist, if nobody else has to get you there. But finding some way to talk about it.
So let's kind of pull this back to the original question again. What would you have said to emo 18-year-old Noah? I'm super clingy. I'm obviously looking for primarily relationships with women over men. Primarily texting them and not stopping, and just don't know the definition of not, being myself and not relying on other people. How would you pastor a kid in that position?
A kid that's always just clinging.
Yeah, just
so
clinging.
I would take that focus from clinging onto people and advise you to cling onto God. Where it's the advising of teaching you to think people the relationships we have are important, but God is where we're going to get the most help from. And that kind of touches a little bit on the sermon that I preached, in trusting in God, and sort of what and doing that in community is important. But doing it focused, if you're only ever trying to seek help from humans, you won't find good help.
No, definitely will not.
What would you guys think?
I guess because I feel like I had a similar experience, not with someone calling suicide prevention, but I guess with being clingy. Because I feel like I went through a period where I didn't have anybody. Then when I finally got someone, it's just like you holding on too hard, or whatever. And I actually had an experience where I feel like that was on the verge of happening, somebody else doing that to me. And it was I want to say he was to me, he was a relative because he was my cousin's brother, but we were not related by blood because they were half siblings, if that makes sense. So I kind of got the sense that he was looking for somebody to connect to spiritually, and because he was friends with other family members of mine on Facebook, then he found me because I had talked to him years ago, but we just got out of touch, and so he found me again, which was fine. And then he was I could tell that he was really eager to connect with somebody spiritually, because he would get so excited about it that he would just want to move way too fast, because I hadn't spoken to him or seen him in years. And so I really didn't know who he was as a person. So I was fine talking to him, but he was just really pressing on I want to see your face. Can I FaceTime you? Can we meet up? And it's I was like, I really don't want to do that right now. I don't want to FaceTime you, but I can talk to you over the phone. And he just kept pressing the issue, even though I kept telling him that I did not want to talk on the phone because I was not ready to do that yet.
Right.
And it got to a point where he started to get kind of, offended that I would not answer the FaceTime call or whatever. And so when he was making comments I can't really talk to anybody on my dad's side or my mom's side because they're not spiritual, and then you won't answer my phone call, so who am I supposed to talk to, kind of thing. So I just deal with it myself, kind of thing. And it was just kind of I don't mind talking to you, but you're just pressing way too hard. And at that point, it's kind of, I don't really know what to say to you, because I don't want to just cut you off because you're trying so hard with me because you don't have anybody else, but then I don't want you to put me in a position where I'm doing something that makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
And so I guess also being on the other end of that, I guess what I would say is just to, I don't know, I guess.
To yourself.
Well, just in general, I'm just saying based on my experience with being kind of clingy and then somebody else being clingy with me as well, based on that experience, I would just say to take it a little bit at a time, because sometimes you just give too much to somebody else because you're so happy that somebody else is finally talking to you and listening to you, that you're just trying to lay everything about yourself on somebody else. And I feel like it's kind of like, dating, if that makes sense. It's like when you first meet somebody, you don't tell them everything about yourself. You don't lay everything on them. It's like a process. So I probably would let them know that it's like a process of revealing things, like just doing it a little bit at a time. Because that's what I was trying to get him to do, was like take it step by step. It's like, it's nothing wrong with telling somebody that, but you don't have to like call multiple times during the day. You don't have to do this, like, 'cause you're just being too much at that point. So it's like, let's just reveal a little bit at a time. And then if you feel yourself getting desperate, that's when I would just, go to God. 'Cause I feel like God is always available. He's never too busy. He's never going to cut you off or say, I don't want to talk about this. So I feel like when you get those urges to like, I just want to talk and call, like direct that towards God, and then do step by step with people. Like, you can do all that with God, but with people, you have to take it step by step, because humans are just wired differently.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
What do you think, Garrett?
Um,
What did you say to 18-year-old emo Noah?
18-year-old emo. No. Oh, so to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just someone that's in that position, that's like a clingy 18-year-old depressed kid that's looking for any attention he can get, primarily through women. Like, how would you pastor that kid?
One, I would start with the question. I would just ask, okay, so Noah, what is it that you want?
Mm-hmm.
Because just from my experience, I've noticed sometimes people can do and never really have like a solid intention out of this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why, okay, why are you calling me? I'm not to be mean.
Right.
But it's like, okay, why are you, why are you calling me? Where are these questions coming from? What, like, okay, so like, let's start there. What do you want? Are you looking for a friend? Are you trying to get closer to God? Is there issues going on at home? What is it? Like, let's be clear on what is it that you want.
I think emo kid Noah would have said love.
Love. Okay.
Yeah, I think he, like, deep down, I think he would want to, he wanted like the romantic, like someone to always like come and save the day from like the dark soul of the night.
now you all up in you like all up in my childhood, I promise.
Like, I think emo kid Noah would have said, like, I want like all of my emotions to be happy all the time. And
if that's the answer, I would just begin with, what is it, like, I would just ask questions, because that's really how people begin conversation and stuff. Like, okay, so a love, okay, what did that look like for you in your childhood growing up?
Yeah.
Did you not get that as a kid, and that's why you feel like you want it now?
Yeah.
It really stems from there. And China, my wife, she's very big on kids, especially those first 5 years. She said that is the most critical part of a child's life, those first 5 years. And I don't think a lot of people give, well, I could be wrong, but I don't know if a lot of people really give a lot of attention or are very intentional with those first 5 years.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I would start what you want, and then if that was the answer, I would just say, okay, so what is it about love? Like, let's be, let's know what we're doing here, so I can properly help you.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I would do. I would just we'll just start one bit by bit. Let's just take this slow. Let's figure out what it is you want. And sometimes, like I said earlier, like sometimes folks just need that therapy session themselves to kind of dig that deep. Like,
and I think that's good because, like, I think that's good because, like, that's not what I got in response when I was 18. The responses were typically like, brush off. Like they
Yeah.
actually want to know.
Yeah.
Why is it you're like this?
Yeah, I would
They
wanna
just
know.
try to dodge.
Yeah,
You
I would
know,
wanna
like
know. Yeah.
and so I think that's the good thing that you're
Yeah.
showing is that like one of the ways to handle a situation like that is to actually pursue that and get beyond what you're dealing with in the moment and actually ask the why are you this way question, you know.
And-
Because sometimes I don't even know if emo kid Noah would have.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
I don't
Like,
even know like why. I probably wouldn't have.
Yeah. And like I guess because honestly, like, and me and my wife identify with this a lot because to be honest, growing up, okay, I grew up homeless. My brother worked at the Nike factory, so I would from time to time have nice shoes. I would get jumped for them sometimes. That's how I learned how to fight. And so yeah, like for me, it was I had to do a lot on my own because my parents did the best. I stress that all the time. My parents did the best they could, but no, we didn't have family time. We didn't have movie night with the family. We didn't have a lot of family. We had some. We didn't have a lot of family dinners. Didn't even have a home to have it sometimes. And so a lot of stuff I had to figure out on my own. I had to like figure this out. Like, I don't know. That's probably why I'm like that, where I just dive into stuff and figure it out and learn as I go, because it's like nobody really walked me through. Okay, this is what you do. No. Basically, I didn't grow up with somebody holding my hand.
Yeah.
Never had that.
Yeah.
So, with that, I grew up quick. I learned to think quick. I learned how to think, just do stuff like faster, stuff like that. And what I found myself over time realizing is, like, that's like the big chunk of my childhood. But I honestly cannot say that I had just a lot of traumatic like things in my life that happened. I really can't say. And so, I guess with that, growing up, I always tried to fit in because people didn't like that. People like really criticized me for that. Like, because I didn't go through what you went through, like, I don't belong as your friend. And it's like, it ain't my fault that I did. Like, I couldn't control my childhood. And so, long story short, I grew up always trying to fit in to avoid that spotlight that people would give me because I didn't go through what you went through, or I didn't have that when I grew up and you did, so basically you feel like that's a problem. So I always stood out. I didn't want to, but I just always stood out. People would always ask me what I think about stuff, and I would tell them and they wouldn't like it. Why did you ask me? And so I just always found myself, and that's honestly why I'm called to be a preacher or a pastor, because I was always that kind of guy where you wanted me around but then you didn't. So like I always like stuck out when I didn't want to. I didn't want to be in the spotlight. I didn't want you to ask me questions. I didn't want that. I didn't want but just people just always like pick on Garrett. Like, okay, well, and then, when I would be called out, it would be I'll get picked on. I'd always be the person that the teacher would pick to. You know how teachers would teach and they like give an example like, okay, well, so I need 3 people. I'd always be the one that they would call it. Okay, Garrett, come here. I'm gonna use you. It's like, man, why in the world? Like, you always gotta pick me. And so for me, I would say that more so was the thing I struggled with internally as a kid. Was just the issue of always standing out where I didn't want to.
Yeah, I get that.
yeah, I feel like I was the same, but I think yours was different from mine, because I feel like you were standing out in a good way, but it sounded like you were standing out in a good way. You just didn't view it as good. It's how like people people wanted to hear your opinions and they wanted to like put you in the forefront, and you were like, no, I don't want that. Yeah.
Like people, like, I guess I knew people wanted to hear what I had to say, but I knew that came with backlash, and I was sick of the backlash.
Yeah, I think.
But go ahead.
Oh, sorry, but I think for me, it's like I've always been different too. But I think with me, it's like I never tried to fit in because I knew that I couldn't. So I didn't waste my time doing it for the most part. And I think that in itself just came with backlash, the fact that I wasn't trying so hard to be like everybody else. And I think that in itself made me stick out like a sore thumb, and people hated me because of that, because, like, for example, like everybody in the cafeteria would be eating. It's like I would be reading. I love to read. And I knew people were going to hate me for that, but then it's like, I did it, and so it's like, that was just the kind of person that I was. And so it was just like, I I knew that I couldn't fit in. It was like it was never gonna happen. And so like even in the few attempts that I tried to make, something would always go wrong, and I would immediately get kicked out. Like, 'cause I remember I don't know why I'm talking about this, but I remember this one time I was like, it was like, because like I was at the YMCA because when I was growing up in elementary school, like our parents would send us to the YMCA for daycare because they were at work and they couldn't pick us up right away, so we would just wait there. And so you know how kids form their little cliques and everything, and then like I was trying so hard to be a part of this girl group, and then like the second I tried to be a part of it, immediately I did something wrong and they didn't like me. They were like, I'm done with you. Like, so I was out of the group, like within a matter of minutes. Like, it wasn't even like several days or several weeks. It was like a matter of minutes. And so it was just like, even in those few moments where I tried so hard to fit in, it was like, nope, get pushed right back out. Yeah. And so it was just kind of like, at that point, I just realized, it really doesn't matter. I might as well just do my own thing, and people are going to hate me for it. And it hurt. It sucked. But I mean, it was what it was.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that all of us at some point feel like we've had some type of that role as the clingy person, whether it might be through your personal life growing up, feeling like, I really want to like cling to the ideas that I believe are right, even, and for you, like trying to fit in even, and having that desire not to, and wanting to cling to people and them not letting you, like it sounds like in some ways all of us have some kind of relating or empathy that we can have for people that are very clingy. So we've only got a couple minutes left, so I kind of want to wrap up really just with, we've kind of set the stage for kind of this topic overall, which I think is awesome. I think everybody's had some great thoughts, but I am curious going forward, do you feel like in your overall what's the way to ask this question? Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm over here laughing. Your
Garrett
timing
threw me
is
off.
awesome, bro. Like,
what?
Your timing is like. How do you know you have a few minutes left?
Oh no, he showed me his phone.
Okay. The timing is awesome. How do you do that?
No, you're good. You're good. I was like, why is he laughing? Threw me off, Garrett. What was I saying? Question. So, after hearing all this and things like that, what my hope is that if you are listening to this, you can have a better idea of people in that situation, that you can go throughout your life now with a better understanding of what it's like to be the clingy person, what it's like to be the person that's the friend of a clingy person, and how to manage those types of relationships. But is there any final thoughts that any of you want to leave with on this? Anything that's still...
Yeah, I was thinking about the subject of oversharing that Jacob brought up. And I was also going to say this, because I think that this is something, and I think that if somebody is opening up to you and telling them something, it's your responsibility not to overshare that information. Like, somebody isn't telling you that for you to go around to the whole church or to the whole family or to the whole neighborhood and say, oh, guess what so-and-so is going through. And I would even say that even with prophecies from God. Like, if God is giving you information about somebody else, he's not doing that for you to tell everybody else. Like, he may be doing that for you to tell that person directly as a correction, but he's trusting you with that information, understanding that you're not going to use what the ability that he's giving you, that information that he's giving you, to hurt somebody else. Because I've kind of been at the other end of that, where I didn't tell anybody anything, but they knew something about me prophetically, and they were saying something to me in front of somebody else that had nothing to do with it. Yeah. And so my thing is, like, you have to be very careful about that, because God is trusting you with that information, and he's not trusting you with it so you can use it against somebody else, but so you can build up that person.
Right.
Yeah.
That was good. What I would say is, this age group, really, if biblically, really get familiar with the armor of God. That's something that when I was reading over this week, and I just couldn't help but realize how important this really is.
Ephesians 6,
Ephesians
by the
6,
way.
10 through 20. Yeah. And it's really important, because, honestly, some of it is tricks. Some of it is, sometimes the enemy does try to creep in your head and tell you things and get in your mind, and sometimes you begin to believe lies that really aren't even true, but because you don't know who you are, you don't know, you don't have understanding of who you are, why God made you, and you don't really have understanding of identity, and there's so many issues that the enemy uses to trick you, and lack of parents in the household, or lack of a father or a mother, or whatever the case may be, that a lot of times, we believe lies more than we actually believe the truth. And I think that came out of nowhere. But more so, just really get familiar with that, the armor of God. Like, that's one part of the Bible that is very imperative to this age group, because we're all trying to figure it out. We all going through stuff. We all have different things we've been through, and that's one of the most important things that any person needs.
So what do you see about the armor of God that helps with clinginess specifically?
Ashley mentioned it, Jacob mentioned it. Just kind of understand that balance between clinging to humans and clinging to God, because the armor of God, in my studies, it talks about how he gives the belt of truth, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the shoes of peace, and all this. And one thing that I ran across, and the most common thing I noticed in each commentary and through the podcast I listen to, and just as I pick people's brains about it, is those what do you call it? The pieces that the people wore.
Yeah.
Those things come from God. You lean on God for that. You just got to put the armor on, and then God's going to do the fight. Like, of course, you got to pray and stuff like that, because Paul, after that, he mentioned about prayer and supplication. That's what you do, but the armor of God, you just put it on, and then from there on, God's going to, he's going to more so do the fighting on the spiritual side for you. It's just put it on. And so I guess one part specifically is the clingy part. Sometimes we depend on people too easy and too much, and not on God, and that's a mental health. Like, we're talking about mental health. I believe the helmet of salvation has to do with the mind and protecting the mind and stuff like that. So the helmet of salvation is probably one part to
I like
really
that.
spend some time on.
You just had a mental image in my head. We tend to use people as body shields as opposed to putting on our own armor.
Yeah. And so the armor of God is as I read it, I overlooked that for years, but when I studied, I was like, this is really, really important. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I love that.
And
That's awesome.
The sword.
Yeah.
I guess really quick, sorry. The truth, the truth, the belt of truth. That's one thing that people spend a lot of time on. It's just like, what is the truth? How do you objective truth, subjective truth, and like the truth is so I guess, like, in a simple way, how would you define the truth? For me, from my studies, I realized the truth is just the original way God designed things to be. And the truth, okay, who did God design you to be? It starts with identity and purpose and things of that nature, and just kind of knowing your word, and one, accepting that the word is true. And then from there, just kind of really working on finding your identity in the Bible, and spending time with people who know themselves. They can kind of sharpen you and be around you to help, encourage, console. Having a well-rounded circle of friends is important to a well-rounded circle of friends. But also just
Not square.
square.
Sorry,
but-
I had to.
No,
it's
you're
such a
good.
serious topic. You got to put some humor in.
No, you're good. That was good. Or triangle, octagon, man, But
Triangles will never work out. A lot of triangles.
Love triangle. Love triangle.
Oh man. Yeah. But just the belt, the truth, and just kind of accepting the word to understand that the word is true for yourself. And then when Jesus he was tempted by Satan, the devil knows the Bible too. So really, when Jesus he fought back. So I keep getting stuff as I talk. When Satan said something about him, he responded back with the word. But then also being very careful not to even get entangled, even arguing with the enemy. Because most of the time when Jesus a lot of times when Jesus, when the demon came in the picture, Jesus just shoot it off. Like, that time in the desert, in the wilderness, he replied with scripture like maybe 2 or 3 times. Then he just kind of just said like, be gone. But a lot of other times, he may have said 1 or 2 things, but you didn't really see him getting just a big entanglement.
So you're saying don't indulge the argument with the devil? If
Don't.
there's like that invasive thought in your head that you're worthless or that you're not of value, don't indulge that.
Yeah.
Get it out quick and move on.
And it takes work. Mental health in terms of the condition of your mind, your thinking, But you got to think about, okay, well, how do you get your mind healthy? It's like a body. You work out. How do you get your body healthy? You work out, you go to the gym.
Yeah. So I wouldn't know, but
to get your mind healthy, you have to start working out. So, this book I read, 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. This is a really helpful book. It's 13 points. Don't waste your time feeling sorry for yourself. Don't give away your power. Don't shy away from change. Don't focus on things you can't control. Don't worry about pleasing everyone, and just so far. Don't fear taking calculated risks. And just, you kind of have to, like, stuff like that, mental health books. And really, it takes time. You have to work on it. So kind of putting things in your mind, new information into your mind, and then over time just practicing it, remembering it. And one of the most biggest things I read is, like, find a mantra. When you get a thought that's not positive, have a mantra you say to yourself that helps you fight it back.
Yeah,
Practice
if
it.
anyone has seen Luca, the new Pixar movie, there's a great example of a mantra where he tells the kid every time he's afraid. I can't remember the name he says, but he gives a name to that intrusive thought, and he says, "Shut up," whatever the name is, and it's just like a mantra he says anytime he has like a fear. He's just like, "Be quiet." I can't remember the name. It's gonna bug me. Someone in the comments will correct me.
Yeah.
But that's actually a very great advice.
And the devil submits.
Yeah.
He has to. Through Jesus' name, he has to submit. That's nothing he can argue with. That's not negotiable.
Yeah.
And so,
What about you, Jacob?
Yeah. So as far as closing thoughts to somebody who struggles with being clingy, similar to what Garrett was saying, is I would suggest when you have that urge to talk to someone and you're feeling like you're being too clingy, talk to God about it. Oftentimes we think prayer and talking to God is the last thing that we need to do, and if we're to that point, then we're way beyond saving or something. Whereas if we're really starting with that, so a lot of times our processes can go a lot easier.
Yeah.
So I would really trusting in God, that God will hear you out.
Yeah.
That God will be there when you call on him. Always clinging on to people, you may get to the point to where you're feeling like people aren't always responding the way you want them to.
Yeah.
But God will never shrug you off. Taking things into prayer and fighting it that way. That's the point of the armor of God, is to fight spiritual warfare, right? So when you're doing that, that's a lot of mental health issues can boil down to a spiritual warfare. It's a mental issue that can be fought spiritually. And that can start the biggest weapon you have is prayer.
Yeah, and I was actually going to say something in relation to you said about using people as a body shield, but I was thinking about that's kind of what prayer is when you're praying for someone else, because I thought about Moses constantly praying on behalf of the Israelites, even when God wanted to destroy them, and then Moses stepping in and being that shield for them was the thing that stopped them from being destroyed. And so, and I think sometimes it's hard to pray for yourself. Sometimes you get to a point where you're just like, I just don't want to pray for myself, or that kind of that. And I think I was thinking about what you were saying, because that was something that I'm still learning now, is being able to come to God with certain things, even when he's coming to me, telling me to do something and I don't do it perfectly, or I don't feel like doing it because I feel like I can't do it, or I'm not the right person to do it. And then I give God pushback on it, or it's the idea of just being honest with God. Because I think a lot of people have a fear that, well, if I tell God how I really feel about this, like there's like some type of punishment or conviction, not conviction, but punishment involved. Like he's going to get mad at me. He's going to be disappointed in me. He's not the person I want to talk to, because he's going to be the one who's going to judge me, because he's perfect. He's up here and then I'm down here. And I think that getting to a point where I realize that whatever feelings I have or whatever mistakes I made does not change me from being a child of God. Because I remember I heard God tell me that specifically when I was just going through my head all the things that I'm not good at doing, all the achievements that I have not made yet. And he was like, and you are still a child of God. And it doesn't change anything. Like the fact that you have not reached the level that you think you need to be at, the fact that you have not done certain things, even in comparison to others, does not change the fact that you are a child of God, and that God is not going to give up on you, And I think a lot of people think that God is going to give up, because it can be a process. Like, I feel like our entire life is a process, and then God is willing to submit to that process, and I think that we have to be willing to submit to it, and but it's difficult, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great to end on. Let's say thank you so much for tuning in tonight. It's been a blast to have all of you here, and look forward to next week. We'll keep. I don't know what we'll do next week. We'll be back next week. He unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but we'll. I'm sure he'll think of something. He always does.
he'll just like come up here 5 minutes before and be like, yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
We love you, Nick. Thank you, everybody. And Jacob is going to make an awkward way back to the back.
Yep, I'm going to awkwardly walk away now.
Don't forget to tune into our Sunday service. This week we are doing a worship night, so be on the lookout for that. It's going to be great. We live stream at 7 p.m. So if you want to hear some awesome worship music, you can come in person. We are still here at the Dutcom Memorial Chapel. It's 3097 Knight Road. So feel free to come down, or you can tune in the live stream. Thank you so much.